Hello everyone, and a warm welcome from Canada. Welcome to my session at the NVivo virtual conference on the application and importance of qualitative research in a changing world. My name is Rita Zuba Prokopetz, and I completed the Doctor of Education in Distance Education program at Athabasca University last July. Thank you so much for attending my session today and for your interest in my recent research on electronic portfolios. I conducted an online ethnography with graduate students in a university in Western Canada during 3 iterations of a course that included ePortfolios. My intent was to gain an understanding of self-reflection and peer-to-peer reflection in the development of ePortfolio projects. I first heard about NVivo during my program orientation at Athabasca in 2015, and since then I have made an effort to understand how to apply the software to enable me to use it comfortably in my studies. The methodology for this study was an ethnography in which the ePortfolio interactions and student presentations were observed. The triangulation of data collection was established through surveying 6 students in a written questionnaire with close and open-ended questions and interviewing the same 6 students in semi-structured interviews of open-ended questions. Data were also collected from 21 archived student ePortfolio presentations. Today, I plan to provide background information for my online ethnography, share the evolution of my fieldwork, and explain how I envisioned my storytelling of a community initially as an observer, then in the community as a participant, followed by the telling of a story by the community members themselves. I will cover the research questions my study sought to address, share information about my data sources and analysis, and unveil how my positionality anchored my online ethnography and supported my analysis process. I will mention some of the recommendations by sharing with you what the course participants saw as relevant, how they envisioned possible changes, and why they considered such approach. I will conclude by briefly stating some ideas and areas for future study. My involvement in the ePortfolio community actually began 3 years before my research study. Since the site of my fieldwork was an online course, a live course, I returned to the literature to find out more about ethnography in virtual, online, or digital spaces. As such, I was introduced to a new form or way of conceiving ethnography, virtual ethnography, developed in response to a need to study communities in spaces of the internet. In my online ethnography, my goal was to gain an understanding of the concerted meanings of the course participants who shared a culture, an ePortfolio subculture in a capstone ePortfolio course. Therefore, I needed to become familiar with the activities, challenges, and shared knowledge of the members to enable a type of investigation that depicts the ways of life of the writer, myself, and those being observed, the students. Ethnography is open-ended. It's not defined in terms of its boundaries. As an observer, I had an outsider perspective as I attempted to see commonalities with the insider view of the learners. To obtain a rich description of my experience, I used the introspection as my personal process of understanding an ePortfolio subculture, and applied it in a broader sense in my meaning-making journey to gain insights into this learning community in internet learning spaces. As I engaged in inward thinking, I realized that my perceptions influenced my interpretation and impacted my relationship with the students. Therefore, while observing, I maintained an ethic view as I adjusted and adapted my reporting. As a participant in this community, I aim to be viewed as an insider to reduce the student perceptions of my being distant and not a member of the community. As aligned with my research approach, I became the primary research technique. My distinctive research method of participation and observation privileged my body as a site of knowing. As such, my fieldwork necessitated my immersion in the course site for sufficient amounts of time to participate inside the culture and to be able to tell the story of a community. My research journal was a great data source even before I began my study and throughout my data collection, analysis, interpretation, and reporting of my findings. My diagram represents my involvement in each of the 3 courses I relied for my field notes of what I heard, what I saw, and on my everyday observations. As an observer who also participated in the community, I began to interact with the students who viewed me as an active participant. This interaction resulted in my gaining an endemic perspective of this community whose members share their sentiments with one another. My mixed methods approach included the storytelling by the community members in the form of questionnaires, interviews, and archived audio files, in addition to my field notes and my research journal. As a reflexive researcher, I thought about my experience and examined my way of doing. I also relied on my own interpretation after reflecting on my field experiences to align my reporting with my own positionality. My research questions were born from the observable communications between students in the course and their communicated struggles with the capstone ePortfolio project. My primary research questions pertain to self-reflection, which is the essence of the first layer of my study. My interest was in learning the value, if any, students perceived of the reflective process in the development of their ePortfolios. The questions in the second layer deal with peer-to-peer reflection resulting from peer feedback giving and receiving interactions. I wanted to learn more about the extent feedback interaction provided the participants a sense of belonging to a subculture in an online learning community. My data collection techniques included both primary and secondary sources, which were pre-approved by the Research Ethics Board, and they comprised of my ongoing participation in the discussion forum, ePortfolio pages, and synchronous information sessions. They also included the audio files of the student presentations, as well as responses to the questionnaires and interviews. My reflective journal and my personal notes were also a rich data source. With this multitude of data sources, I needed a tool to assist me, and I used the NVivo analytics software. I imported my ePortfolio pages as my reflective journal using nCapture, and relied on NVivo transcription to view student transcripts while listening to their recording. Once I had imported into NVivo all data sources, I explored the information to become more familiar with it, conducted my auto-coding by themes, and then proceeded with a series of queries to look for word frequency. This phase was followed by reflection, as I viewed information about each theme organized inside a container or NVivo node. I generated graphic representations based on participant-created data to view the information in another format to help with my sense-making in preparation for my reporting. In addition to the hierarchy and other charts created using NVivo, I used Wordle software to create word cloud visualizations of textual data to help me identify aspects of the themes that resonated the most frequently with the participants. My student license at the time did not include word cloud visuals, so I had to rely on additional ways to not only view my data, but also support my findings to enable me to tell the stories as they were being unveiled to me by the students themselves. The ePortfolio in my study is part of an ecosystem, a resilient and diverse network of systems in the Capstone ePortfolio course, and includes construction of knowledge, communication, critical reflection, and reflective feedback giving and receiving. The ePortfolio ecosystem, underpinned by construction and co-construction of knowledge, is where members of an ePortfolio community demonstrate cognition and affect as they rely on the affordances of their learning environment to complete the ePortfolio projects. The affective domain, as part of a system internal to the learners, includes the learner's awareness and understanding of their own thought processes or metacognition, and their interests, attitudes, and values, along with development of appreciations and judgment. The affordances of the environment, the systems operating within and internal to the learners, as outlined in ecological constructivism, and the gradual awareness of growth in both learning and attitudes in a community of learners underpinned my observations. Before, during, and after my analysis process, I relied on NVivo refresher webinars to keep abreast of any new features of the software. There are many, by the way, on various aspects of how to create a project, import files, conduct auto-coding, visualize the information, etc. And these webinars have been very useful to me. In fact, it was by registering for and attending one of the refresher webinars that I became aware of the NVivo transcription, a feature that applies the latest technology for the provision of automated transcription with fairly good accuracy, I was told at the time. I was a work in progress then. Once I learned how to use this new feature, I incorporated it in my data collection and analysis. I was then able to upload the student records to NVivo Transcribe, where each 1 hour of data took only half the time to transcribe. Subsequently, I spent time reviewing and correcting discrepancies in transcription of many of the passages in all 21 transcription files. In order to become even more familiar with the data, I chose to return to the recordings of each of the student presentations up to 4 times sometimes. In doing so, I was able to verify the accuracy of my transcribed notes. In addition, I gained further insight into the stories of the participants, the stories they were sharing with me. Fascinating, actually. I also relied on my own interpretation after reflecting on my field experiences to align my reporting with my ontological, epistemological, and axiological positioning. In other words, how I view myself, my knowing, and my value system. Once we position ourselves intellectually, theoretically, and philosophically on a personal, academic, and professional level, we're able to cement the pathway for the storytelling of others based on their perspective. Also fascinating. In order to keep me grounded as the participant, observer, and researcher, I relied on sufficient time and space to enable me to embrace the student experiences as they happened. In order to ensure my data collection was viewed as trustworthy, I included multiple participant-generated data sources, questionnaires, interviews, recording of the presentations to allow for cross-verification during the data gathering phase. To include methodological triangulation, I maintained a research journal with my reflective thoughts and field notes, along with reflexive passages, to further ensure an ongoing examination of how my research was being conducted at every stage. Additionally, I relied on the analytical software to help me both maintain documentation rigor and provide an audit trail. After observing, participating, and interacting in a community of learners, I proceeded with my data collection, coding, verification, and reporting of my findings. Recommendations made by the study participants include having both prerequisite courses to help facilitate the development of reflection, as well as study buddies to help with feedback interaction. Students also expressed the need to learn more about the course structure and affordances provided by their learning environment, including the use of a practice room to enable the community members to interact on an ongoing basis. There was also an interest in learning more about feedback giving and receiving, reflection, and the alignment of core competencies using a meta-analytical approach. From my perspective, I see a value in including in each course iteration presentations by former ePortfolio graduates in order to not only provide modeling, but also share the legacy in the community of ePortfolio creators. Areas that emerged for future study include the impact of study buddies and choice of platforms in ePortfolio projects. An area of interest to me is domain integration, including an analysis of the effect and areas related to self-development and social competence in ePortfolio projects for both students and educators, in addition to the learning awareness resulting from ePortfolio experiences. Although my study has covered the concepts of pedagogy, technology, reflection, and feedback interaction, further studies on the impact and application would help inform the ePortfolio community and further contribute to the already robust literature on ePortfolios as disruptive pedagogy in blended and online learning environments. Here are some of the references on which I based today's presentation. Thank you so much for attending my session at the NVivo virtual conference on the application and importance of qualitative research and a changing world. Thank you so much.